Without further ado, I will introduce Terrie M. Williams, who is a social worker by training. Terrie earned a master's in social work from Columbia University. But it was her venture into the entrepreneurial world as the founder of the Terrie Williams Agency, one of the country's most successful public relations and communications firms that made an enduring mark in the archives of business history. She had a pretty good beginning. Since its launch in 1988 with superstar Eddie Murphy and jazz legend Miles Davis as her first clients, the agency has handled some of the biggest names in entertainment, sports, business, and politics. As an author, Terrie has written 3 successful books. Her latest, A Plentiful Harvest, Creating Balance and Harmony Through the 7 Living Virtues, published by Warner Books in 2002, is her undertaking to help others achieve balance in their daily lives. Terrie is one of the country's most highly sought-after speakers and has shared her unique brand of success and personal development strategies with numerous Fortune 500 companies and countless organizations. Williams has also dealt with and managed chronic depression for almost half her life. Her story was recently detailed in the June 2005 issue of Essence magazine to an overwhelming national response, as well as in several newspapers. Terrie's new book entitled, It Just Looks Like I'm Not Hurting, Depression, Hope, and Healing in Black American Life will be out under Simon & Schuster's Scribner book series in 2007. We are truly privileged today to have Terrie Williams with us. Please come.
Hello, everyone. Again, I bring you greetings today from the Stay Strong Foundation. We feel very, very honored and privileged to be co-hosting this event this evening with the W.E.B. Du Bois Institute, and also a very special thanks to Eli Lilly and Company for an educational grant to allow us to do this. My heart is really full today to be here because it's my passion, and all of us on the panel today are united in getting the message out about how mental illness affects our community. Black people are dying, and we don't even know what the symptoms are. We don't even know what depression looks like. And so we're here today to share not just the professional side of ourselves, but also the personal side of ourselves, because the reality is everybody walks around with a game face on, right? The game face says that everything is fine, and so many people are really, really dying inside, and we don't talk about it. I think oftentimes black folks would rather say that they have a relative in jail or on drugs before they will mention any kind of mental illness. Is it, y'all believe? Yes. So we have to start talking about it so that people feel that they are not alone. I'll share with you briefly my story. As Karen mentioned, I shared it in Essence last year. What happened to me is I've had a very successful public relations company. I write books, I speak for a living, and I was giving all of Terrie away. Giving nothing at all to Terrie. I was always there for my clients. I was always there for employees, everybody else but Terrie. I've suffered from depression since I was 24 years old. And though I am trained, I didn't even recognize what was happening to me. But I know that over the course of the last 25 years, 2 or 3 times I've been on medication, off and on, saw a therapist. And then 3 years ago, I had really an emotional breakdown where it was the most horrific time in my life. It's a place that I really never, ever want to go back to. I would wake up in the morning with crippling anxiety, like just didn't want to face the day. I would cry for just hours on end. They would just come without warning, oftentimes just before I was getting ready to go somewhere to speak or to have a meeting. But God always gave me the presence, the strength to not fall apart in public. At those moments, I felt like, is this what a nervous breakdown feels like? I was highly irritable, angry, snapping at people, and it was, I don't even have any words to tell you. Words don't even begin to convey what it feels like. It's almost like, I was speaking with someone the other day, and she was saying that when you suffer from depression or you're sensitive, it's almost like walking around with no skin. And I thought that that was kind of interesting way to put it. I got an email from someone last night who I had just run into recently, and she said something that made me think about how I see my life. And she said, I can't help but feel that even as debilitating as your depression was, that there was a specific purpose in it. It's almost as if your life's work here on this earth is to heal. Interesting that you chose specifically 2 very exhausting careers. So, so what draws people to you ultimately becomes draining for you, yet it is the experience of being drained that gives you the ability to recognize it in other people. And where others suffer in silence, you once again rise to the occasion to give honesty a platform. I used to wonder sometimes when people would say that God told them to do something, but I know for sure that he does do that, because I wouldn't have put my business out on Front Street if he had not directed me to share my story. And it has been the most incredible experience. I've gotten about 3,000 letters from people around the country just saying thank you for having the courage. Thank you for telling me what the symptoms are, because I don't know. The reality is depression is, it's obviously an issue that many, many people across the board suffer from, but it's a unique kind of situation for us, because being black and being depressed is almost like a condition of being black in America. Every day we are in pain over certain things that we can't do or can't get to just because of society, and so it makes it difficult to be. And then for many, I think that just being black people, a lot of black people expect to be in pain every day, so we don't know that there's another way to feel. We're always supposed to carry the burden. And so I will just share with you that, it's funny, when I did first share the story, and people would come up to me that I hadn't seen in a long time, and I could tell by the way they were coming toward me, they were a little tentative that they wanted to mention this article. So they would start to come toward me, and I said, look, I can tell you must have read this article. Don't worry, I took my medication today. Everything is fine. And so we would just chuckle about it. It would open the door for the conversation, because we whisper the word. And even now people will come to me and say, I read the story about your depression. I was like, it's okay. You don't have to whisper the word. It's really okay. And then the other thing I noticed was interesting is that people started being nicer to me. Carrying my bags. If they see me carrying my bags, they would ask if they could carry my bags. Or the other day, this brother came up to me and he said, I read your story. How are you doing? So in many ways, it's brought my life full circle. I am a social worker by training. And because of that, it makes my depression rear its ugly head oftentimes, because I'm very, very sensitive to taking in other people's pain. And as a social worker and working with kids who were, people who were terminally ill or at-risk youth, I was constantly taking in other people's pain and not having anywhere to go with it. So I just wanted to share that with you all as a backdrop. I am just a woman on fire these days, because it makes no sense to me on the planet for people to be needlessly and silently suffering because they think that they're alone. The reality is everybody's walking around passing for normal. That's what I think. What y'all think? Yes. And feel free to speak up. We're going to have a little open exchange here. And because we're here at the university, before I introduce you to our panel, I wanted to share something with you from, again, a letter that I just got from 2 college students. So one college student sent in a letter. I sent her a copy of the Essence article, and she said to me, I had to go back and read the email I sent you again just to make sure I wasn't imagining the similarity. It feels like I wrote that article. I identified with every single word. I do feel better, more hopeful at least, not because others feel the pain that I do, but because at least I know I really am not that unusual, deficient, or crazy. That's why we're here today. And then you find out you're not standing on the ledge alone. You find out, you're not crazy, or you might be crazy, but then you realize everybody else is too, walking that fine line. And then this other letter, just to share with you, this is again, is a college student. And she spent the 4 years of her life running away from problems. I would snap on people I loved. I would withdraw from people that I cared about. I was abusive to myself and others, and I would cry several times a day. I hated myself. I hated my life. I hated everything and everyone. I'm not sure what made me decide to talk to someone. I think I got afraid. But I knew that I was two different people. I couldn't control my actions. I was scared. I lost it. I had a breakdown. The good news is that once you're aware of the symptoms, you can be treated. That's the good news. So we have to carry this message out, recognize it in ourselves, in our families, and our friends, and carry the message out so that we can begin to heal. I think the only way that we're going to heal is if we share our stories with each other, and then we will begin to heal. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel to you. What we're going to do, each person is going to share some thoughts with you about why they're here, their personal and professional experience with the issue of mental health and mental illness. And then what we would like to do is hear from you. We would like you to participate in this, perhaps share a story, something that you have been struggling with. That's our hope. First, I'd like to introduce Tracy Tyrone Moore, right here on the left. My right, your whatever. Brother here with the braids. Tracy Tyrone Moore is a senior here. He concentrates in classics. He is the president of the Harvard Black Men's Forum. And he'll tell you a little bit more about the organization. He's here because he, too, has a passion about spreading the message, and what he will share with you is the story of his father, who was chronically depressed for the last, he was in a position, a major preacher in his town, lost his job, and became really quite depressed, and so he's here to share that with us. The next person that I would like to introduce you to is Dr. Alpha Stewart. Now, Alpha is coming full circle here, and she's going to share that with you. She said, don't even bother reading my bio. I'm just a small-town girl trying to make it in the big city. She started out as an actor. She is a psychiatrist, healthcare administrator, and nationally recognized expert in public sector and minority issues in mental health. She's a native of Tennessee. Trust me, she's incredibly credentialed. She also is of counsel to the WNBA in terms of working with the players and the pressures and the stress that they are under. So please welcome Dr. Alpha Stewart. And did y'all clap for Tracy? Okay. Okay. The next person that I would love to introduce you to is one of those people that, just doesn't really need an introduction. But Dr. Alvin Poussaint, who is the director of the Media Center of the Judge Baker Children's Center in Boston, also a professor of psychiatry and faculty associate dean for student affairs at Harvard Medical School. He co-authored with James Comer The Raising of Black Children, and also a really, really powerful book that he wrote, and he will share the story of his own brother's suicide in a book that we're sorry that we don't have copies here today, but it's an amazing read. It's called Lay My Burden Down. And he will talk about suicide and mental health crisis among black folks. He's also a consultant to The Cosby Show and Little Bill and Fatherhood on Nickelodeon. Please welcome Dr. Poussaint. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce you to Rhonda Ross, who is just an amazing human being who I've been blessed to come to know. She's headlined the national tour of the Vagina Monologues, appeared in a number of productions, New York's Public Theater, starred in Bessie Coleman, A Dream to Fly, on Showtime. She's probably best known for her Emmy-nominated role of Toni Burrell on the NBC soap opera Another World. Went to Brown. She's an acclaimed vocalist, and performing her unique brand of musical poetry around the world. She and her husband, jazz pianist Rodney Kendrick, have an incredible album, and they just move through the country just performing at clubs around the country. She wrote a very, very powerful story in the October issue of Essence last year about what it's like to, I should also mention to you, she happens to also be the daughter of icons Diana Ross and Berry Gordy. So that's her lineage, and the name of the piece was In the Shadow of the Stunning. And what she does is talk about the pain of not appreciating her beauty for what it was, because she was the brown-skinned one in the family and had biracial sisters and brothers. And so it's very, very poignant, and she's going to be sharing what that felt like. Please welcome Rhonda Ross. Now, you all might be a little tired of me talking, but I just need to say another thing to you. I write a column for Feds magazine, and a young brother who's a retired blood, he's a gang member, just really basically doesn't go out and shoot and kill anymore, wrote to me, has an amazing story that he wanted to share. He's not here, but I wanted his voice to be here, so I would like to just share something with you that he said. The language is a tad bit rough, but I think I need to say it the way he said it. Many times I envision my life being taken at the hands of a young Crip seeking stripes, with his Alpha and my Omega. A G, which means gangster, a G will be buried and one born. I often find myself drinking to relieve myself of the reality of the life I've led, homies that I've lost, and the conclusion to my life. When my mental feels like it's going to burst from the stress, frustration, regrets, and reality of things that have transpired in my life, I bust open a 40-ounce of Old English. With every sip that quenches my soul, I allow my nerves to settle and my mind to wonder. This is how I escape my daily fears. This is my private airplane that takes me out of the state I no longer wish to be in. For this, do I get judged? Well, I say don't judge me for wanting to stop the pain I feel for those lost during the war, but judge me for the pain I choose not to cause. Which was very interesting to me, because when I met him last week, he said to me that they used to be on the payroll for killing. And so his reward was, the gratification that he got was in the killing. Now his reward is in letting somebody slide. And I thought that that was really quite powerful, that is, he no longer is in that life, and he oversees about 100 other bloods. And what he does now is keep them from executing people. So it's really kind of deep, and I feel very blessed to be having this kind of exchange with him. It says, by no means has my transcendence been easy, or for that matter, fun. I didn't receive pounds and shout-outs for wanting to live. Lack of a better word, I received more chilled vibes for my resignation of wanting to die. I hope you can appreciate me sharing this with you. It's very personal to me, and it's what I deal with day in and day out. I'm still working on my behavior and attitude daily, and know that I must have faith in doing so. That from a former gang member. And lastly, I want to share with you once again my heart. It's personal and comes from the deepest part of me that one can't see. I sit in this fucking house and I see the healing valleys below set ablaze. By this I mean I'm in a healing process, but then reality tells me I could and would never be shit. I went from nothing to something, back to nothing, and now I may have the opportunity to be something again. This may be news to you, but it's a fear that I have, the fear of failing again. I left my mother in outstanding debt. Now she's selling her house, which she has to move out of in 2 months. I've let a lot of people down, and if I was to embark on this journey and fail again, I really couldn't handle that. I still struggle every day with shit most don't know. Don't forget, I am an OG of my set. That's original gangster, those who might not know. I am responsible for 100+ individuals just in Newark alone. And I have to deal with all of their problems, fools getting shot, killed, locked up. I just got a letter from my homie Snack in Trenton, who's serving 20 for attempted murder on a Crip and attempted murder on a cop. He's one of many, but I still feel his pain because a lot of the dirt and damage he's caused were at the request of me. I'm still mourning for my homie Mega Rue, who got killed last year in Newark on 18th and Sunset, shot 6 times in the head by some Hoover Crips. I still mourn for my homie Meggett, to whom I dedicate this book. He was killed by some Bloods, shot in the head 5 times. I'm still mourning for my homegirl Dakota, raped and gagged to death, and the list just goes on and on. Shit is frustrating, and sometimes when I get in the depressed mood, I want to relieve myself. I don't want to hurt motherfuckers, sometimes I want to hurt them, but I know that that ain't the answer. Don't be confused by my intelligence, for underneath it is a bunch of chaos and anger. I now know that my anger, my depression, my worry feeds the fire to my intelligence, for my experiences give me wisdom. Pardon me for laying this on you, but I have a lot on my shoulders, and life is still trying to prove to me that I'm worth living. Things such as what you've done for me, things like this give me a reason to keep fighting. I just share that with you because that's everywhere we go. When we see young people out on the street, young brothers, this is how they're thinking, this is how they are feeling, and we need to know that. Up close and personal, we need to know that. And it's funny, I met with him about a week ago. He came with 2 homies, and we took a picture together, and they like doing the gang sign, and I'm like, what have I gotten myself into now? And said to me that because I cared enough to be there, I was protected for life. Not that I was going to go out and ask them to do anything on my behalf, but I just wanted to share that with you because I think it's important to know. I feel blessed because I'm understanding how they think. So, without further ado, who would like to start? Okay. Alpha, Rhonda.
I'll start.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Hi, how's everyone doing? Good. Can you hear me? In the back, you can hear me? Thank you. So, as Terrie said, my name is Rhonda Ross. I am the things she said, an actress, a vocalist, a writer, happily married, and also the daughter of Dinah Ross and Berry Gordy. I first want to say that I'm so thankful, Terrie, to have been invited to be here.
I'm glad to have you.
I've known Terrie for maybe 5-6 years, 5 or 6 years, but it was a year ago this month that she was doing a radio show in New York for Women's History Month, and she asked me to be a guest. And I thought, what on earth will I say? And she said, oh, just come on and just talk about what struggles you may have had and how you've gotten over them. And I thought, gosh, do I have anything to say? So we had a wonderful radio show, just a quick, question-answer type of thing, and it went really well. I had written a piece, and so I emailed it to her the following day, and it's the piece that ended up being in the Essence magazine in October. Did anyone see that? Read that? Ooh, you guys got to get more Essence. What? Terrie, you got to be on that.
I got some copies. It's a powerful testimony.
It was just about growing up with a mother who is praised and has been praised, rightfully so, for her beauty, and how, as her child, I had to find my own way through that, my own beauty, my own self-love, and my own self-acceptance. And so I sent this piece to her, and she was very, very, very instrumental in getting it published for me. And I just think it's very fitting that a year later we're doing this together. But what I discussed in the piece and what I want to discuss today, because again, I said when she asked me to be here, I said, yeah, I struggle like everybody struggles. I think everybody, I think you're absolutely right, everybody struggles. White, black, male, female, I think we all struggle. I think black folks struggle in a different way and for different reasons, maybe more. But we all struggle. I think it's the human condition. And so in that respect, I knew I had something to offer. But is my struggle so interesting? That's why I was asking Terrie, you know, what can I bring here? But as I was thinking and preparing to be here, I thought, let me just share what my years have been and elaborate on what the article was. So some here may know and some don't, but my mother has 5 children. I'm the oldest of 5, and I'm the only child between her and Barry. The other 2 are with a lovely man named Bob, white man, and the other 2 teenagers are with a man who's now deceased, Arne Ness, a Norwegian, another white man. So I was literally the only non-biracial child in my family. But to add to that, until I was 13, I thought I was biracial. So I had been told that Bob, who married my mother while she was pregnant with another man's child, he loved her and he loved me, and he wanted to raise me as his own. And they decided to do that. And it wasn't until I was 13, and I looked so different from my sisters and so much like my father, that they said, my mother made the decision, a very difficult decision, to tell me the truth and let me know, you know, that Barry was my biological father. So until 13, yeah. So growing up was an interesting challenge for me with the iconic beauty of my mother and my sisters having lighter skin and straighter hair and less Afrocentric features. It was really a challenge to find my worth and my value, especially in a society that constantly puts down blackness. So I struggled with that, and I looked for it. I didn't find it. I missed it. I straightened my hair. I stayed out of the sun. I did whatever I could to try to fit in. I mean, teenage years are difficult anyway, trying to find beauty for anybody. And so it was a struggle. I had success in other areas. I went to Brown, as Terrie mentioned, and I did well, and went on from there and started a singing career and an acting career, and I did well. And it wasn't until '94 when I met my husband, who has a very rare experience of being a black man from a black family that adores being black. And really wasn't raised with this stuff that so many of us struggle with. Shockingly to me, he has a memory of being in junior high, and there's that one girl in junior high who's the darkest, with the kinkiest hair and the fullest lips and the biggest nose, and all the boys are like, oh, I don't want to be with her. And his mother said, oh, why don't you go be with Doreen? She's so pretty. And meant it with everything in her heart. And the truth is, because he came from that kind of mother, he looked at her and found beauty. Now, all his homeboys were, giving him a hard time, but that's the beauty that he knows and that he still upholds. So I'm very blessed to have gotten him as a husband. And when we got together in '94, we've been together 12 years, married going on 9. When we came together, I was still struggling. I was an African American history major at Brown, so I was looking that way, but I was straightening my hair, and I was just feeling like I had to somehow fix what God had given me. He's an all perfect God, but I got the kinky hair, and and maybe my skin shouldn't be this dark or whatever. So I was still struggling with that, and it wasn't until he and I began our relationship that I really started to see and really started to question, these images that were given on television, in magazines, the advertisement, what we say to each other, what mothers say to daughters about their looks, about their beauty, about their hair, about their potential, about their intellectual potential, who they can be, who they can't be. all of that we do, I started paying really close attention. I started paying really close attention to myself, to what words I use, to what thoughts I think about myself, about others when I look at my sisters and my brothers. And what am I used to saying and used to thinking, and what are the jokes? You know, I heard a joke the other day. A teenage boy said something about, ooh, Nelly, or one of, so I think it was Nelly. Ooh, Nelly's one of the ugliest Says who? Says who? Who is saying this that's allowing us to make jokes about ourselves and talk, oh, his lips are so big, ooh, you know, whatever. So I started questioning and looking, and I remember being on the subway, and South Africa, the black South Africans had just gotten the vote, and I was sitting on the subway and I was reading the newspaper, and I was so proud and pleased, and I saw them in the pictures lined up for miles waiting to vote, and I thought and then as I read, there were pictures of the white South Africans who were opposing it, and I was reading about how much violence there had been about the white South Africans who had opposed it, and I thought, wait a second, you know, what is going on? Why am I sitting here going every 8 weeks to go make sure my roots don't show? And here I am looking at this thing in this newspaper that is, why am I trying to be something I'm not? Why can't I relate to those people standing online and get my strength and my power from those people?
Wow.
And it was like this aha moment. And I went home and I told Rodney, I said, you know, I'm not going to relax my hair anymore. He said, yeah, girl, just go to the beauty parlor. Come on, you can't do that. I said, I'm not. And I waited about eight weeks or so. I let a little bit grow in, and I cut it all off. I started short. I had dreadlocks for 10 years. They grew to about the middle of my thigh. I just cut them off about a year ago, a little over a year ago. I'm still natural. And I tell you, those years and this past year has taught me so much about myself. And you know, they say it's just a hairstyle to some extent. But what it does is it teaches you who you are. It teaches you to love yourself, to accept yourself. It also shows you all that's out there against you, because it comes out against you. Yes. Grow those locks, it comes out against you. And because my locks were so long, some people could accept it. But when I cut it and just had nappy little afro, that was unacceptable to just, people on the street stopped me. And what? Why did you cut? What? You know, so it was just a wonderful, it's been a wonderful journey of honestly looking at myself and being able to understand what we are all dealing with. And I think that it is so much, I think it's bigger than physical beauty or hairstyle or whatever, but I think that is representative. That is a microcosm of self-love and self-acceptance. And I think that is the bottom line of what is still sick and still missing amongst our people, amongst black people. That is still something that we have to heal. That is still something that we have to improve about ourselves. Our thoughts, our words, what we say, what we accept about ourselves, our possibility and our potential. So I am constantly looking at that and looking at how I can improve that for myself and for the people that I work with. I am, as a singer, as a writer, as an actress, how can I share that information that I have and the experience that I've gone through? Okay. So later, after everyone's spoken, if there are questions, I do have ways that I walk myself through the struggles, the times that I wake up with crazy anxiety or can't sleep or tears come for no reason or fear, crippling fear for no reason. I have ways that I deal with that, and I'll be open for questions later. After.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Okay.
Thank you. I will never forget the first time I ever heard of or saw Dr. Alvin Poussaint. Would you mind going next? The amazing light force in the field of psychiatry. We are so proud of you. Trailblazer.
Hello to everybody. It's good to be here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, people with problems up there, but I hope we can think about it more holistically, like not just mental health, but health in general, because it all connects, you know. If you're depressed, for instance, you're more likely to get diabetes. If you get diabetes, you're more likely to get depressed. So a lot of the health issues are connected with the mind, and some people are begin to talk about brain disease instead of mental health per se, as a way, in fact, when we say brain disease, some people don't feel that's not the same stigma than if we say mental illness. Mm-hmm. Or if we say you have a chemical imbalance, hey, chemical imbalance, I can deal with that. That means I'm not crazy, and then it removes some of the stigma. Anyway, these are strategies in terms of accessing people. But Terrie mentioned my brother and suicide. Actually, my brother committed what I call a slow suicide, which is a term I use to describe a lot of people with chronic self-destructive behavior, headed for an early death, who are risk takers, which a lot of our folks are. That is, the depression is not, and the suicide isn't acted out directly, but it's acted out indirectly. In other words, if you see suicide as the ultimate form of self-destructive behavior to the self, killing yourself, you have a whole spectrum along the way, right? Where you're doing things destructive to yourself, to your health. If you're depressed, often you don't care about your health. If you don't feel you have any self-worth, you don't care about your health. You also may engage in high-risk behaviors. So a lot of young black men who are shooting each other up and killing each other, part of that high-risk behavior that they engage in is self-destructive and may be connected frequently with depression. But this is the way they're acting it out. There's even an expression called victim-precipitated homicide. Victim-precipitated homicide is a suicide, but you get someone else to kill you and provoke them into killing. Now, this has been established. This is real, not make-believe. There's even one term that it's got a lot of connotations to it, but it's been documented, and that's suicide by cop. Mm-hmm. Where, now I'm not just talking about black men, I'm talking about men usually, not women, who do things to provoke the police killing them because of the stigma of killing yourself. If you believe that, they rather have someone else shoot them. And particularly black men are prone to thinking that way a bit more than black women for obvious kinds of reasons. I should mention the book, Lay My Burden Down, which I did with Amy Alexander, who used to live in Boston, was a journalist, actually who came to chat with me about, not as a patient, but about things she was thinking about. And she had a brother who committed suicide. And she said nobody in the family would ever talk about it. Yep. That it was just a wall of silence from her mother, her father, her brothers and sisters. And this was like 25 years later, no one would talk about the suicide. And so she began to talk about the story to me. And what was coincidental, her brother's history was so similar to my brother's history. They were both junkies. They're both drug addicts, right? They were both into, on the fringe, shady stuff. They both had a breakdown, which was characterized as schizophrenia at the time. My brother eventually died from acute meningitis, which we think he got from a dirty needle. See, now you get AIDS. But dirty needles used to give you sepsis and bacteremia and meningitis. Amy's brother committed suicide directly by jumping off the roof of a church in her hometown. So when we heard these two stories, look how similar they are. So I talked about my brother's slow suicide, her brother's direct suicide, but that certainly my brother had a lot of suicidal things about him in terms of a lot of his behavior. And we decided to write the book for some of the things that Terrie mentioned, that is to break the silence. You wouldn't believe, but when I said I was writing a book about suicide, I had a lot of black people, professional black people, say, why are you writing that? Black people don't commit suicide. Now that's how silent we keep it, that they don't think black people commit suicide. Of course, which is not true. And I'll just say these facts so you'll have them. Black males commit suicide about close to 5 times to 6 times the rate of black women. You're talking about a black male rate of 11.2 per 100,000, and black women have 1.9. Now, people have used that low figure to suggest that black women don't have depression. And this may be one of the reasons why it's missed, right? Or denial going on. Well, they're not killing themselves at the same rate as black men. They don't have depression. The fact is, the epidemiologists tell us that black women have suicide at least twice the rate, not suicide, depression at least twice the rate of black men. Now, all of these figures, you have to think when you hear figures like that, because men are more capable sometimes of not admitting to depression, hiding that depression, or acting it out in other ways. So I don't know that black men have less depression than black women, right? They may have more. If you look at even now a lot of the self-destructive things that are going on among black men in the community. So black women have a much lower suicide rate than black men, and the suicide rate among black men has been going up the past couple of decades, particularly in young black men. We do not know why. We don't have the social demographics to be able to tell you anything about why, because they don't collect that kind of data. The other fact you should know is that white people kill themselves at twice the rate that black people do. Now, that always comes as a surprise, because some people think, well, black have hard times, so on, so on, so on, that suicide rate should be higher than whites. Again, something Terrie mentioned, all it depends on what your expectations of life are in the first place. If you think you're going to have a hard time, nobody knows the trouble I've seen and all that kind of stuff, you may have a lot of difficulties and feel, well, that's your lot in life, and you don't resort to suicide. As well, the black church has a big taboo against suicide as well. So all of those things come together. What's interesting to me is you take a survey of blacks, which have been taken, a lot of blacks don't see depression in the first place as a mental disorder. They'll talk about it as a personal weakness, but they don't see it as something you're supposed to see a doctor, a psychiatrist, or anybody else. Now, it's interesting that blacks deny that depression is an issue when black people invented the blues. Okay, now think about that. We took it and incorporated it into the culture. Well, blues was all about suffering, and my wife, my woman, and gone, and all this kind of stuff, right? Talking about suffering. That then has become a synonym in American language to depression. Is I got the blues.
That's right.
But blacks themselves, if you survey them, don't think about it in that way. Also, because they don't think depression is an issue or it's a personal weakness, about 2/3 of black people, when surveyed, said they would not take antidepressant medication even if it was given to them by a doctor. I'm just laying this out to show you the kind of scope of kinds of things we're dealing with in terms of the black community, access to psychiatric care, psychological care, and even public awareness, which is one of the biggest missions I think that we have facing us, that Terrie and other people are helping to do, so that people begin to think about these things and know when they should seek help. And there's all different kinds of help. I'm not talking about any one kind, but that 80% of depression does improve with treatment. Either talk therapy, medication, talk therapy, and medication. A combination of those things will make a difference. Now, depression isn't the only thing that black people suffer from. There's all the other mental disorders, which, bipolar, which is a little bit different than just straight depression, and also schizophrenia, and then a host of other kinds of things in this diagnostic manual. But we have to become more aware of these things so that we can help each other and also help our children, because there's antecedents frequently to certain mental disorders and depression in terms of how people are being treated. I'm glad you brought up the whole issue of what blacks think about themselves, because I think that the legacies of slavery, Jim Crow, and racism have left a lot of scars, which then impinge and affect our behaviors and even our sense of self-worth. One of the things in depression is you have a lousy feeling of self-worth. Well, if you already have low self-worth because you're black, or you're black and you're poor because that's what they've been telling you for 350 years, right, with the sinks in the head, then we got a double kind of problem. So those are legacies associated with the slave experience.
Yes.
People get upset or think you're being unscientific when people use that term post-traumatic slavery disorder. But if you think about it in terms of the legacies and scars, two things: we're inferior, we're ugly, and our lives aren't worth much. Do you see what I mean? So if you devalue your own life, see, if the young black men Terrie was talking about devalue their own life, they also devalue the lives of people who look like them.
That's right.
And then it makes it much easier for them to kill each other.
Yes.
So all of these things are interlaced and connected and even affect our depression. Both Amy's brother and my brother, when they became psychotic, race came into the picture. Racial stuff started coming out. Feelings about themselves being black and all kinds of things. So this is intermeshed, I think, with a lot of psychiatric and psychological issues that black people have to face and then intrude themselves on all levels and spectrums in terms of any so-called mental disorders. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. You said one thing that you spoke about, when you talked about post-traumatic slavery syndrome, there's a book by Dr. Joy Leary. I don't know how many of you are familiar with her, but it's a book that you also want to check out. And she spoke about a case where two young men got into an altercation, and one had a gun, and he attempted to shoot this young man 4 times. The first time he tried to shoot him, it didn't go off. The guy clearly could have run away, but he kept saying, no, shoot me. Just go ahead and shoot me. 3 times, it didn't go off. The 4th time it went off, shot him in the jaw, so he had to go to the hospital. But that victim-precipitated suicide is homicide, right, is very, 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 very real. Ty, would you share with us a few minutes? Then we'll come back to Dr. Alpha.
All right. Hello, everybody. See, I guess the reason I'm here, for the most part, is to talk about my experiences in dealing with depression as far as my father is concerned. I also have a very close friend of mine who was depressed. And I'll just go ahead and...
And that friend is a student here as well, correct?
Correct. Yeah,
okay.
He's a student here. And, one of the reasons I'm here is to, as they've said, try to help dispel or eliminate this taboo. I myself, even though I've been affected, a decent amount by, people, by through my experiences with people who are depressed. At the same time, I've only, this is the first time I've ever talked about my father's depression publicly with anybody who's not in my really, really, really close inner circle. So, that alone just sort of gives you an idea of how personal this issue is to a lot of people. I think, everybody's sort of afraid to talk about depression because then, as they said, they're crazy. There's something wrong with them, that type of thing. But I don't really think that's the case. To start off, giving you a couple of quick statistics. 80% of Harvard students were, they reported themselves as having been depressed at least one time in last year alone. So that just sort of gives you an idea of how prevalent depression is. In addition to that, 39% of college students nationwide were depressed to the point of not functioning in the past year. So that sort of just gives you a really easy way to grasp how serious this mental health issue is. So my father used to be a preacher, pastor of a church in the projects in Cincinnati, Ohio. It wasn't the biggest church in the town or anything, but he definitely did some good. And growing up, he was a big part of my life. The main reason that I started playing piano at the age of 8, he used to drive me everywhere, take me to baseball, basketball. We even used to play PlayStation, Madden football together. So he was a pretty big part of my life. Then right around my freshman year in high school, a little bit before then, he lost his job. He got fired for various reasons. I'm not going to really go into that right now. And it affected him a lot. He would act like it didn't really affect him, but it clearly did. We still played Madden, but the activities that he would perform around the house, the amount he would communicate to others and whatnot, it all just started declining to the point where, I guess maybe in my sophomore year in high school, he essentially would spend the entire day just closed up in a room, come out to eat, and every once in a while, talk to us. But really, the thing about depression, I've been told, is that depressed individuals, they sort of have a cloudy vision of life. Like it's really unclear to them. They really have not much of a sense of self-worth. And it was definitely evident in my father. He had a doctorate in ministry, and he was really intelligent. Always, encouraged me to be, to pursue academics and all these good things. But when he became depressed, he just seemed to really. It seemed like his intelligence decreased exponentially, so that was one thing that was really difficult for me to deal with, because he was always really smart, encouraged me to work hard in school, even had a doctorate, but the conversations that he was capable of maintaining were not up to par with where they used to be. And so that was just one really difficult thing for me to understand.
Excuse me, Ty.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you, what was the support like in the family? How was it being observed by other members of the family? Did somebody say something's wrong? Was it spoken about?
Yeah, well, the thing is, eventually, he, and I'm not sure how it came about, but eventually he started seeing a psychiatrist. I think that it was really weird, because I think he was in somewhat of a denial stage. He told me, he tried to say that he was just acting like he was depressed and that sort of thing, and to me that made no sense at all. But I don't know, so like he tried to act as if it was some sort of ruse, almost like a Trojan horse or something.
Some kind of what?
Ruse, like just this big trick or whatever. But I think that was just because the church was really close to his heart, and he lost it. So then he had to find some reason to be like, oh, this is the reason I'm not in the church. I'm just acting, or I don't know. It was really confused. So as far as my family, family support, it was really difficult on us. Like, I couldn't really understand it at all. Like, I had no idea what this phenomenon of depression was. I had no idea why he seemed to be so much less intelligent. Why he was really capable of not maintaining conversation. Why he always wanted to just spend his time sleeping or just really isolated from everybody. And, it was taxing on my mom as well, and really on the whole family. I mean, we still tried to interact with him, but it was just really hard because, he didn't really want interaction at all. He didn't want to do things. We would try to do things. We did things for him. We try to make him happy and that sort of thing. But it's really, really hard. He was chronically depressed. I might add that. So it wasn't just, I guess, normal depression.
Okay.
So
Thank you so much, and for your courage in speaking about it for the first time. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Alpha, and then we're going to open up for questions and sharing of stories.
Okay, well, first let me say how truly honored I am to be here with this panel. These are very dynamic and courageous people. And as Terrie told you in the introduction, I see myself as a small-town girl who went off to the big city because, A, it was expected that you would do that and do well and, make good things happen, and B, because I was forever curious, which probably resulted in landing me in more trouble more often than not. But it was that curiosity, and this is something Terrie referred to in the introduction, that I've come full circle. It was, in fact, at Harvard University, although I did not attend school here. I did come up for a summer program. It was a program for students who were interested in math and science, might be interested in a medical school, entering medical school, becoming doctors. And I was kind of on the fence about it. It was an okay thing, but it seemed a little restrictive to me, and it took a little long to do. And I had other ideas. I was going to be an actress, be on Broadway, probably win a Tony or two, those kinds of things. That was my world, my dream. But my mother had other ideas, and so, long story short, I wound up in a room with a person who was a part of the summer program whose sole purpose in life, it seemed to me at the time, was to make me unhappy, disappointed, and angry. And he did it so well that I have never forgotten it, and that man was Alvin Poussaint. I told him before we started I was going to tell the story again, because I do this every time we sit on a panel together. Because I think in many respects it encapsulates some of the things that people have already talked about today. The expectation that one will use one's skills in some way that benefits is just a part of who we are culturally. It certainly was a part of my upbringing coming, I was a baby girl in a Southern family whose father adored her, who was alternately described as mischievous and brilliant. And there's sometimes a thin line between those things in families. But I came here that summer, and someone got in my face and said, you can do this. That's clear, you're here. But it's a matter of whether you want to do it. And if you don't want to do it, get out of the way and let somebody who wants to do it do it. And that kind of a challenge from someone that you only know as a respected member of an elite group of professional people is enough to get your juices flowing. So I'm always happy to be seated on a panel with him, because I think it both reflects the need for us, if we're really going to focus on destigmatizing, and if we're really going to address some of the barriers in the African American community to people talking about mental illness, understanding mental illness, we have got to have some heroes, some people who stand up when it's not convenient to say things and say, or get off the pot. And for me, that was one of those seminal moments. There have been others since then, not the least of which was the first time I saw him after I hadn't seen him in a while, and he didn't know I had become a psychiatrist in addition to being a doctor. There are just some challenges, I think, in life that you should not avoid, and this turned out to be one of mine. But the stigma, the barriers to treatment, the lack of understanding, the fear, the anguish that we experience. You've heard some of the things. Most of what I do today, after spending 30 years in a variety of governmental positions, trying to work within the system to change policies, to make things work for people, and being somewhat frustrated in the course of doing that, most of my passion today is on eliminating stigma, educating the public, making black folks specifically. I mean, I'm invested in public education and public awareness, but I'm most specifically focused on African American communities, African American people, folks who look like me, who aren't getting a good deal in the system. You heard Dr. Poussaint say, it's not just mental health, it's the overall health of an individual. Living in poverty means you will have a lower health status. Living in poverty adds some psychological things to the mix, on top of the post-traumatic slave syndrome, on top of the day-to-day, what friends of ours, colleagues of ours call the micro-insults and the microaggressions. On top of all of those things, anyone with a genetic predisposition, having depression in the family, having schizophrenia in the family, having any of the mental illnesses in the family, all of these things, the cumulative effect of all of this is to really make us unhealthy, not well, not function at our best, not take advantage of the opportunities to find heroes and people who inspire you, and to use the skills that God gives us, whether it's singing. I don't sing or do those things, but I talk. And I engage in discussions with people about what we have to do. You know, this is about us participating in a community effort to get the word out. These are real illnesses, whether it's depression or schizophrenia or panic disorder or any of the other spectrum of brain diseases, as we now call them. They are real. We have the science base now to talk about why certain treatments are effective in black folks and should be used in black folks that we aren't getting. We've got the science to support some of the research that's been quoted already about percentages of black women who are depressed versus black men, and the ways we do outreach. We know some things, but we still haven't been able to insinuate that into the very fabric of the black community. And so when we talk about making people aware and educating the community and eliminating the stigma and reducing the barriers, we're talking about pulling out all the stops. We're talking about what we did when we decided to take back our communities with violence, from the violence. We're talking about public health approaches that we know have been useful in our community. Everything from screening men for prostate cancer to encouraging women to have full physical examinations and not allow doctors not to address potential cardiac problems where we were discriminated against previously. All of these things, there are precedents for everything that we're talking about we can do and should do that we've already done. We've taken it to churches, we've gone to schools, we go to the community mental health centers, the community recreational centers. Wherever people gather, we go, we spread the message, and we bring people along one by one. The epidemic that now exists on college campuses, you've heard part of, I didn't realize that here at Harvard it was 80% admit to being depressed, but that is not unheard of in other places around the country. We raise our kids, we send them off to school, and we expect that they're going to be able to handle all of this new stuff, all of these things that are going on. And we haven't addressed some of the very basic issues that they confront when they're out there on their own without us as the sort of guideposts to make things right, to make decisions. We have got to do a much better job than we are doing. We've got to talk about it. We've got to not be embarrassed. What you see sitting here before you are 4 individuals who each has their own story about an experience with an illness in themselves or in a family member. And being a psychiatrist, we were talking earlier, doesn't make me immune. You know, in my sister circle, I've got one friend who actually got so depressed, and we were together for one of our little girl weekends, that I thought we were just there to have fun, and she was expressing her depressive feelings, and I was having fun because I was not working. And the others threw pillows at me and said, "Are you listening to what she is saying?" You know, so we try to turn it off, we try to ignore it, but we are not immune to these things happening in us or in our circle of family and friends. So if you take away nothing else from what I say today, these are real illnesses. We are better at treating mental illnesses, particularly depression, than we are at treating cardiovascular disease. And you know how good we're doing with that. Everybody's on antihypertensive med. Everybody's got 2 or 3 of them probably at this point. And blood pressures are managed and stable and everything. We have got to pay that same kind of attention to the focus for what this panel is here for today, mental illness, making people aware, understanding these are real illnesses. They are treatable illnesses, and that the treatments are effective, and that people who receive treatment go on to lead happy, productive lives through recovery.
Thank you, Altha. One of the things that occurred, I received a number of letters from people who were therapists and psychiatrists who talked about the depression that they themselves were experiencing, or what it's like to take in people's pain day after day. Do you have anything personally that you might want to share with regard to that, or briefly, or?
Well, I think, and there are probably plenty of people like me in the audience, with elderly parents. You know, when you're sent off into the world to do the wonderful things you're raised to do, parents rarely complain and tell you when they're not feeling well and stuff. And as my luck would have it, while I was off being a gadfly doing all these wonderful things, about which my mother was very proud, she was having little mini strokes and ultimately had the big stroke, and a couple followed that, and required actual care. So I broke ranks in the public sector world. I broke ranks and left a job and went home to take care of my mother. Now, as a doctor, the expectation is that I know what to do. It's just a matter of doing it or getting other people to do it. And it didn't, you know, bad health is just not a cooperative thing. It sort of works on its own schedule and does its own thing. And so I spent a couple of years being a primary caregiver at a time when people looked at me and said, "Are you sort of taking yourself off track, you know?" And I kept thinking, well, this is my mother, and this is what you do. This is how you do it. This is, as I said to one of her friends, I am the daughter she raised me to be, so I can't imagine not doing this. But it wasn't until she actually passed that I realized what a big part of my life had become caregiving. And certainly I've treated patients who were primary caregivers, many people in my age range who have had to shift gears and take on other responsibilities. And it's a nice sort of distant approach you can take in a therapy. You know, you seek help from others, and you encourage these things, and you do these things, and you explore why you feel this way or not this way. It's a whole different animal when it's you. And people are reaching out to you because they know that's what you need. So I think from the standpoint of experiencing both the grief involved in letting go and the depression of the person gone, and the follow-up to that, I think it certainly has resonated with me as something that if I now see it in a patient, I have a much different understanding and awareness of what's really going on. It's no longer that sort of almost mechanical, I understand abstractly, but here's what I think you ought to do from a therapeutic standpoint.
Yeah, thank you, Altha. You know, there were a couple of things. One, I don't know how many of you may have seen it, but there was a big article on the front page of the New York Times 2 days ago about the plight of, I think it was 2 days ago, right? Did you see it? Monday, about the plight of black men in America. Yes, endangered species. And so I just, you know, if you all can pull it up, I think it's worth, you know, just taking note of. And then something, Alvin, that you said that I wanted to pick up on or someone mentioned something just about the black church, and I know that there are some folks here from churches here in the area, but that the whole issue about sometimes that's the devil in you acting up, that we like to say. Does anybody have a comment about that, about how the black church is dealing with mental illness? I think, to me, it's like God led me to the right therapist who prescribed the right prescription for me, do you know? But there are many people who are afraid to speak about it, or when they do, what comes back is, that's just the devil. Yes?
I'll switch back. Thank you. I think that, I said I speak to it, I gotta see what I'm doing. I think that there are always two ways to look at everything, and I think that the church is an easy target, is what I want to say, and I'm not saying that to say to somebody who's sick or hurting or scared or confused or having a mental, truly chemical problem, to say, oh, the devil, whatever. I think that is definitely blowing it off. I definitely think that is not helpful. But I do think church is helpful. It's been very helpful to me. I know God is helpful.
Oh, yes.
And faith is helpful. And I think that, yes, God can lead you to the right therapist, the right prescription, the right doctor, and I know he's done it with me. But at the same time, having a little talk with Jesus can help too. Talking to God, knowing that seeing yourself as a loved creature by God is very, very, very therapeutic, and so I think it can go both ways, and I don't want to just use church as a target for that. So that's my comment.
Okay, no, that's cool. And perhaps it's just that I've had far too many people say that Christians have said to them, they don't even think about the possibility of mental illness. It's just that that's the devil. That's really what I really want to comment. Do any of you have any questions for the panelists? Would you please come to the microphone and please keep your questions brief and address it. And then also, if you have a story to share. Sharon Lopez, I would like for you to share a story in a moment. If you could just say your name. And I want to give a shout out to Dell. Could you stand up, Dell Hamilton in the back, who really organized this event for us today at Du Bois Institute. Thank you. I'm going to ask you to please be brief with your comments or questions.
Sure.
Hey, Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly Chun. Welcome back to Boston, Terry. It's good to see you. I want to thank all of the panelists for sharing your stories and some powerful emotions with the audience. I had a question based on a frontline program that I saw this week. It was, some of you may have seen it. It was called The New Asylums, and talking about the prison population and how 16% of the prison population is considered mentally ill. And, of course, we know a lot of those people are black, and most of them are black men.
That's right.
The point of my question is that some of these people are reentering our communities, and the monies have been cut back. We don't have the support system that we had in place before, and I'm wondering how the community can advocate for people who are coming out of the prisons and who are reentering our communities. How do we advocate? How do we receive them? How do we deal with a population that does not have the support that it had years
That's
ago?
a great question, Kelly. I would just like to say one thing before. Were you going to say something, Alvin? Okay. That's an awesome question, Kelly. And one thing that I would like to say is that I think that each one of us in the room has to use our particular gifts and resources to step into people's lives. I was dead tired, but I flew to Seattle last Friday, came back Saturday, spoke for 2 hours to 70 brothers, mostly brothers. There were 10 white men as well, who had been unjustly accused of crimes and spent between 10 and 25 years in prison for something they did not do. Through the Innocence Project, DNA evidence. There was one brother who went in at 16, came out 24 years later. How to be? So what we have to do is let people know that we're available to come and speak. So what I did was come and talk to them. It was a little inspirational stuff. It was some humor stuff. It was particulars about how to carry yourself. And it means sometimes taking them with you to social events so that they know how to be, and introducing them to people who can help them take their lives to the next level. It's really incumbent upon everybody in this room to care like that, because if we don't, it's open season. Altha? Did you want to say something briefly? Then we have another question.
Just a couple of points, because I agree that was an excellent question, and I think it's something that we have to face, whether we like it or not.
Right.
The majority of the mentally ill in prisons are not there on serious violent crimes. That's the first thing people need to understand. The second thing is, while I think the Twin Towers in Los Angeles is now the largest psychiatric facility by virtue of its large population of mentally ill in that jail system. So as we're looking for strategies and answers, here are two things that I would offer. If you have within the faith community a ministry in the prisons, I would encourage you to encourage them to expand it to include identifying people in need of mental health services outside of that system. Because a lot of what goes on in the system are not things that we can directly impact on. They are systems within systems within systems. And while I think we need to keep struggling to make them better, since that's where many people are, I think some of the focus should be on getting some of those folks out of prison and into communities where they can get the support that they need. We have to go back to the notion of community support programs.
That's right.
Programs like the Volunteers of America, for example, run these probation, parole programs where you actually release to them and you have a certain amount of things that you must do to stay in good with parole and to finish up your charges and everything. We have got to work to include more of us in more of them. We've got to make those programs, because they've been around for a while. I used to work in a couple of them. We know the kinds of things that work with populations of people coming out of prison who have lost socialization skills, lost educational ground, lost a sense of self and self-worth and other things, and who rely on aggression and intimidation for survival.
Right.
Not unlike black people. But we've got to focus more of our community efforts in those things which we know work, because those are the things that are more likely. And this is the unfortunate truth, and 30 years in government has taught me that it is true more often than not. The kinds of programs that you can demonstrate work will continue to be funded. You can continue to push legislators who are adding their little earmark things in their bills. You can continue to send people from this state who may be on appropriations committees and who can add dollars where people say there are no dollars. There is always money in the budget. That's the mistake that we make. There is always money in the budget. The trick is finding out who can put their fingers on the budget, on the money in that budget, and who you can make this a priority for. You want to look for people who have already demonstrated an interest in working on this area. You want to support them, and then you want to introduce mental health issues into the mix. Just a thought.
Thank you, Altha. And it just makes me really think, because what our goal is for you to leave here today with some concrete things that you can do. And it really is. I met a woman through a program a couple of weeks ago who had recently gotten out of prison. There were about 60 women, people talking, sharing their stories. And she heard someone speak, and it was a black woman who was out of prison, who was an administrator now, who talked about her diverse group of friends. And there was this one sister there who was, you could tell she just did not feel good about herself. She was kind of short, a little dumpy, and didn't speak the King's English. And she just asked the question, how did you make white friends? That was just her question. How did you make white friends? She was very stunned that this other black woman had made some white friends. And so it was actually telling her how that works, how you do it, how you step outside your comfort zone. And then I noticed someone at the end because this sister was off in the corner after it was over, who took her by the hand and then walked her over and made her introduce herself to people. Those are the things that we have to do, is to find somebody who needs you and to go and do and help and bring them into your circle. Next question over here.
Oh, hi, my name is Elizabeth, and I just was thinking about what you were saying about when go to church and you talk to people and they say, oh, this is just the devil or this is demonic, because I've heard that from a lot of my church friends. And I just wanted to say that I think it's important that we pray, but also I think it's important that we encourage the people who we're working with that they do get involved with talk therapy. They
Yes.
do get, some type of mental health counseling or medication if that's necessary, because God is there, Jesus is there, and he's there for us. But I think he also equips us as
Yes.
therapists to work with these people as well.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Yes. Quickly, please.
Also, I'd like to piggyback off that part, just that part real quick, and say also people need to read their Bibles.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know their Bibles, and they would know that Luke was a doctor. Luke was out there physically healing as well as spiritually healing. And a lot of people don't know that.
That's right. And there are a lot of depressed characters in the Bible.
Right.
A lot. But anyway, your question, please.
Okay. My question is, there are a lot, I hear about the women, the men programs, but I hear nothing for the preteens and the teens anymore. There are a lot more teens and preteens depressed who are following other bad examples.
You're right. You're right.
And there's a lot more teens who are learning less and less about their culture, about civil rights. If you ask a lot of these teens from 12 to, well, I won't say 12, they're picking up now, but from 15 to 17, about simple common civil rights things that should be common sense, they don't know it.
Okay.
And this is what something I'm doing for the past 9 months is all about, the teens, civil rights, and what it's going to be like in 50 years if we don't catch these teens up.
You're so right. You're right.
And my name is Michelle Magruder.
Michelle, thank you for raising that. It is a critical issue for our youth. Again, kids, adults of every level taking themselves out because everybody walks around pretending that they're fine. And the only way we are going to address this is if we talk about it. I talk to teens all the time, and I always tell them about my depression. And when there are evaluations done, they ends up saying, just appreciate the fact that I was real and I was talking about stuff that most people don't talk about. But they know when something's wrong with us. People sense things, and so we have to begin to talk about it and not act like everything is fine, because they know everything isn't fine. You have a question?
Yes, thank you. Is this on? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
My name is Ina. I have two related questions, one of which is very practical. And the first question is, as a black person, if you're seeking mental health support, how important do you think it is that you find a black person as your counselor or therapist or whatever? And then my second question related to that is, in the Boston area, what are the resources that would help you locate people of color who could provide that support?
Alvin, do you have any comment on that in terms of Boston services?
Well, Boston and the whole idea, if you're black, you need a black therapist. Well, a lot of black people, I get, I'm sure Altha gets them too, I get calls all the time regularly from black people asking me to refer them to black therapists. And there are very few in Boston, right? They're not available. And some new folks are coming in at Cambridge Alliance Health, I think 2 new psychiatrists, there's a couple at Mass General Hospital, but many of them are doing different things which may not be seeing patients. So this is something that black people want and feel is important in looking at certain issues, and there's natural reason to consider that would be so. They would feel, that the black therapist would understand them better and more quickly, and they could, cut to the chase and so on. But since that's not possible, and I'm not saying anything that white patients or people from other ethnic backgrounds do too. You'll find certain white people from certain ethnic backgrounds looking for psychiatrists from that same background because they want to feel the cultural synchrony with them. But I also know white therapists and some Asian therapists in town who I know who are very good and around issues in working with black folks and other minorities who have some cultural competence and sensitivity to the issues. And there's some of my colleagues who I know don't know anything about it who I wouldn't refer black patients to, because I don't think they're up to it or sensitive to the issues. So the short answer is they're not always available, but try to find something. Perhaps go to call a black therapist to refer you to a white one or Asian therapist who they know and who they trust to treat you well. That's an answer to that.
And I'm sorry, Alvin. Were you finished?
No, just the Boston area. I guess I told you there's not many people available, but there are some. But they're all very busy or they're not practicing and other things. But call a black therapist in Boston to see who they possibly can refer you to. And not just psychiatrists, also some psychologists, but not a lot at all, to meet the needs of the population in any way.
I've had two white therapists over the years, and the woman that I'm seeing now is East Indian, and she's just a firecracker. She just, is like really point blank, and I just adore her. So I just think it's just finding a connection with someone that is what works best. Over here now. Your question, sir.
Yes. Well, actually, I have a comment. My name is Cochise Pearson, and I am a Bostonian. And I just wanted to just say briefly that I feel really honored to have the opportunity to meet the panel today, as well as Ms. Williams. I just want to say that, Ms. Ross, Dr. Poussaint, Dr. Stewart, as well as Todd, I thank you for sharing your very compelling stories, your personal stories. Ms. Williams, I actually met you in the early 90s at my alma mater, Northeastern University. I have your book, The Personal Touch, and I use a lot of those tips today. You autographed it. Thank you. My comment is, I grew up in a housing project in Boston, and my mother suffered a mental illness, and it was really embarrassing because a lot of my friends in elementary school and middle school would always make a lot of derogatory comments about my mother in terms of saying that, she's a crazy lady, etc. And it was very, very embarrassing when I was growing up. However, I have learned that sticks and stones may break your bones, but names never hurt you. Mm-hmm. That is totally false. And I want to emphasize that this afternoon, people, please be very sensitive to people's plight, and let's not criticize people. Today, I'm very fortunate to have my mother alive. She does have a mental illness, but she's medicated. Mm-hmm. And I have embraced her. I am no longer ashamed. I have faced the shameness. Once again, I thank you, and please continue to share your wonderful, poignant, and compelling stories.
Thank you for yours. Thank you for yours. That was a very powerful testimony. Yes, right here, sir. How you doing?
Michael Curry. I actually would like to thank Dell as well for inviting many of us to be here today. I've been involved in healthcare policy probably for 8 years as a lobbyist. And one of the issues that's become very important to me is healthcare disparities. And it's interesting to me because timing's so important. Right now, nationally and locally, healthcare disparities is the hot topic. Health insurers, providers, hospitals, everybody's involved in this conversation. The legislature has a commission, a report due out soon. Mm-hmm. The Institute of Medicine had their report on unequal treatment. Cultural competency is the hot topic. Mm-hmm. And it seems that the mental health component of it is left out. And is equally as important as cardiovascular disease or cancer or AIDS or diabetes. And how do we get that integrated into this conversation? And I'm wondering, as part of that information, that we need more studies, we need to make the point better that mental health is the unspoken aspect of this?
Alpha, go ahead, Doctor.
Actually, I think what you say is partially true. I think frequently in a lot of areas, mental health gets put on the back burner or it gets ignored in a lot of things people are doing. And I think it has been played up enough with regard to healthcare disparities. But some people are. For instance, nationally, this is on the agenda. David Satcher, the former United States Surgeon General, in fact, has healthcare disparities, mental health care disparities on his agenda. And as I speak, he's running a whole series of seminars in Atlanta at Morehouse Medical School on mental health care disparities among blacks and whites and so on. So I think it is being put in place by people in leadership positions all around the country. Now, whether it will get the same attention as healthcare disparities in cardiac care is another matter, with a lot of subtleties.
It's also a really important issue as well, because once we awaken people to the importance of getting help, is then the ability to have access. That's another, real issue. But thank you for your question, your comment. Tessel?
Yeah, and another thing I just want to say, I think that we're not activist enough around health care and mental health care. You have to demand. If people are not demanding it, the services and so on, activists about it, just like the way other things work in society, you will not get it. You have to fight for it and demand, and that's the way you get the budget money too. And that's the way you get policies changed, by being activists about these matters.
Thank you. Tessa.
Hi, my name is Tessa Collins. I've spent the last 23 years teaching high school, and I wanted to get the panel to maybe talk about, you're talking about depression, but what I hear in the classroom all the time, maybe every day from the teenagers that I deal with, is stress. And how does stress relate to depression?
Thank you for your question. Anybody have a comment? Because we were talking about it, Alpha, so tell the truth.
Veritas. With an adolescent population, as you are describing, if you think about it, what else would they have to, how else could they describe it other than say stress? Depression conveys a major, significant, a whole sort of series of clinical signs and symptoms that are way outside the realm of their reality. For them, it's talking to the right group, being in the right circle, avoiding the wrong group, staying out of trouble. I just yesterday spoke with a 13-year-old who described to me the stressors facing her each and every day that she went to school in trying to stay just this side of getting into trouble, but standing up for herself, and how difficult it was to navigate that little interface there. Now, if I were talking to somebody who were 25 and they were describing that, I'd probably hear a whole series of clinical signs and symptoms, sleep and appetite and mood disorder and all that other stuff, and it would snap in my mind depression. In a 13-year-old, it's harder for us to understand, and it's harder for them to understand what they're experiencing is a variation on a larger problem, a depression, a mood disturbance, a disorder that is treatable. They call it stress, I think, and not being an adolescent anymore, I'm guessing here, with the limited interaction I have with them, they call it stress because that's easier to describe. It's easier for you to understand what they're talking about. I probed with this 13-year-old the other day exactly what she felt when she was saying she was stressed. And what she described to me was depression. Anger, frustration, disappointment, a sense that she was letting people down, that she was letting herself down, that she was being played was her word, that they're playing me. But if I act out, then I'm going to get in trouble because I'm the one that's got the history of ADHD. And this was a whole big picture for her. But I think we can hear what they say is stress, but we need to understand that it's much bigger than stress as we think about it. When I think about being stressed, I got too many things on my plate. I'm trying to multitask and I can't seem to get it all done. But I'm not connecting with a real serious disorder, clinical disorder, a depression. I think in many of the adolescents, when we hear them describe the stressful lives they lead, we're looking at a generation of people who are already experiencing major illnesses.
Yeah.
But like their predecessors, like us, we can't acknowledge that these things are happening. After all, we're the resilient race. You know, we're the people who have managed to overcome. We got here not by faith alone, but by hard work and perseverance and not letting words turn us around.
But don't you also think we buy into that we're the resilient ones, and that's part of why?
And I think part of the message to this generation of kids who perhaps don't know the civil rights struggle and don't know the history of where we've been and why it's so important that we be as good as we can be here. We really do need to, what's the word I just heard? Relanguage. We need to reshape and reframe the context where we share our expectations for them and our understanding of their difficulties, but still having expectations for them. I mean, if you go back in the lay literature, there were numerous articles in Ebony and Jet back in the day talking about this very thing, a consciousness, an understanding of who we are, an identity that we could relate to, that helped more than a few of us get to the next level when somebody was really, making us mad or upsetting our plan for ourselves. We don't do that much anymore. We're not on MTV talking about identity issues.
Thank you. And I think also, and I know I sound like a broken record, but once again, I really can't stress enough the importance of sharing some of the challenges that we as adults have with young people, because they need to know that we too struggle, and this is how we try to work our issues out, but they think they're alone. And they are, if you go into schools, and I would encourage you to go into schools, community centers, and prisons and talk to young people, not just about if it's a career day, not just about the career, but also what your mental struggles are, because they need to know. I was to also mention, I read, there was an article also in the Times that there are about 15,000 young people who are in prison, in juvenile detention centers, because of mental health issues. And so we really, really do have to, especially these folks who are in prison, they're getting out one day. So I think they need the benefit, if for no other reason. I've been going to prisons and juvenile detention centers for so long that I see these kids out on the street now, and I know that if something was getting ready to go down, they would have my back, And I said to them, a group of 200 kids that I saw once at a juvenile detention center, I said, I took a few noted personalities up there to talk with them, and I said, I hope when you all get out of here that you will stay on the straight and narrow, but on the outside chance that you don't, and you see Miss Williams and you decide to pull a gun, maybe you'll remember that I cared enough to come up and visit you and brought some folks with you. And we smiled about it, but it's true. It's a small world, and you see folks over and over and over again. Hi. You have a question? Or a story you'd like to share briefly?
Comment, actually.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
What's your name?
Valina Jackson.
Valina.
I just want to thank the panel and say ditto, 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 ditto to each and every one of you, because you're so full of these very good stories, and I think it's just so helpful. So I applaud you for coming out here and doing this day. My name is Valina Jackson, and I'm the clinical director of an agency called Brookview House. Brookview House provides supportive services to homeless families and their children. And we provide a full gamut of wraparound holistic and therapeutic services for these families. And I think that we're meeting with a great deal of success. So today I'm looking for an opportunity, not just from the panel, but from my peers in the room, to talk about these models that we're developing in the community that don't always get the publicity on the front page of the New York Times or wherever, and to just ask for opportunities to talk. I'll share my card, share your card with me. I'm open to be on panels and speaking engagements and really talk about the good work that we're doing, because we truly believe that what we're doing works.
That was a really nice and thoughtful commercial. No, seriously, I mean that. I like the way that you presented themselves. Some people like in your face doing a commercial, but yours was really thoughtful, and I think it's that's what we are here to support each other. And there are also things that you can do in terms of establishing relationships with media people who might be receptive to your message, and I'd be happy to talk with you about that briefly, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
I have cards.
Okay. Yes, question or comment quickly?
Hi, my name's Andre, and first of all,
what's your name?
Andre.
Andre.
And I'd like to thank everybody for this whole panel for this discussion and spreading your knowledge. And I'm going to be honest, I came here kind of by accident at first. And even
that's right, never an accident.
Even when I first came, I was thinking like most other blacks think. When I first heard the words, depression, I even wrote down, to be honest, like this feels so white. Whereas the black in this discussion, this is still disconnected from African American culture. And this is what I was thinking because that's what I've been raised. That's my history. That's the way I've been raised all my life. And thank God I stayed and heard, people, especially his story about his father and him saying, and got me thinking about how many times I heard, I feel blue or I feel down in my family and things like that. So I want to thank everybody for that. And I also my question was, how do you spread this message to the majority of blacks? Because this is, to be honest, a small subsection of African American people. This is just a few, mostly educated people that go to panel discussions, that go to universities. Most of us don't do that. I mean, I'm lucky to be in a university for one. So how would I spread that message to other people who are suffering from depression? Because I remember just a few months ago with my best friend Richie in the subway and his biracial girlfriend, and we saw some kind of commercial about depression, and the first instinct for us was to make fun of this because they had a black man on the picture, and we were just thinking, no, this is just BS. This is not. It's nothing to do with us. And she got up and said, I feel depressed sometimes. My family feel depressed sometimes, and she tried to explain to us there was a serious problem. And our first instinct was to say, oh, this is the white side of her speaking because she's biracial. We didn't even think, okay, maybe she has a point. We were just thinking, okay, there's more of them. Wow. This is their point. This is her problem. I mean, that's the truth. No, and so how would you spread that message to most people who
first of all, I want to really applaud you for your candor and being open. And there's no accident that you're here. You're right where you're supposed to be. And if I can just say, because from a public relations standpoint, the thing is to leave no stone unturned. Tell everybody you meet from here on in about this gathering and what you heard and what you learned. And the other thing that you could do is maybe even consider writing an article for a community paper in Boston. I know Nina, where's Nina? She's just here from the Bay State Banner here to cover the event. Now, I'm not trying to put you on blast like you have to go run to her, but I'm saying what I have been doing is all of my friends in the media, I am asking them to let me write a story about what my experience has been or come and talk to me. It's not about me, it's the message. Our people are dying, and if we don't do something about it yesterday, we have nobody to blame but ourselves. That wall of silence is killing us. And when we don't deal with the pain that we're in, because all of us have pain. We go back to when we were 2 or 3 years old, it would tell the story. We let it sit there and it festers, and then it comes out, we overeat. Food is my drug of choice. Food, alcohol, drugs, we have promiscuous sex, as Alvin said, and we kill each other. We hurt and we kill each other. So share with people what you learned the signs are. DMX is bipolar. I was talking to somebody about that, and they said they never realized that a relative of theirs was probably suffering from bipolar disorder. So tell everyone you know. I go to black tie dinners. Whoever's sitting next to me, I'm telling them about what my situation was, anybody in your family, and I hear the most amazing stories. This book that I'm getting ready to do, so many people just want to write. This woman who I spoke about at the beginning wrote me a 4-page letter because she didn't have anybody else to talk to, but she saw this article in Essence magazine. Tell everybody you know. Anybody else have a comment about what he could do? Oh, come on now. Go ahead. Tell yours.
Because one of the ways that around the solution stuff for me is that there are cultural outlets that we've shut down, and some of the ways that we were able to express ourselves and kind of levitate or get beyond some of it is the cultural expression. If you're an artist, you are absolutely charged to do something. You don't even have an option. If you're an artist, you are charged to address this in your work and in your discussion.
And I'm going to say, I know, broken record she is. I'm tired of this broad saying this. I know you're going to say it, but I'm telling you, make yourself available for speaking engagements. Go to schools, go to prisons, go to community centers, and just plant the thought about what depression is and what happens when you're stressed out. Our young people, they're not being parented, and so they don't know. Just like you walked in here today, and now you know, you got to do that for somebody else. I thank you for being here and opening your mind and heart. Yes.
I really came here to hear a lot of what you all had to say, and I really appreciate what you're saying. But also,
Yes.
They're going to actually have a walk May 6th, you know, and that's a way also to get people involved in something like that. You can just say, oh, yes, I'm walking for this. I mean, because that's definitely...
That's a good point.
...buster for people. And they're like, what is wrong? What, you know, you can start telling them that way also. So then also raise funds to actually get the word out even further. So...
Thank you for that. Okay. That's right. That's right. Right. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to finish with the people who are here assembled. And Sharon Lopez is a wonderful person, sister, who came from New York just to be here. She does a lot of special events. Her company, Purple Giraffe Productions, and she coordinates a lot of mental health events and the like. And she has a personal short story that I asked her if she would share.
Yes, Terry, I am sharing my story. This is against my nature to stand up and share, but I am inspired by you. I am inspired by what I've heard here today. And my mind is just racing because there's so much going on that I can relate to. But one of the things that we've talked about, and I've done these similar types of sessions like this around the country on mental health in the African American community, one of the things I don't hear a lot of talking about is about grief and how that affects people. I have a friend right now whose brother died, and she is just so devastated. She just can't even move. She can't leave her house. It's really awful. My mother died in 2000, and I had a lot of stuff going on in my life because I'm always busy, but luckily I've never been afraid to go see a therapist. And in fact, the first therapist I ever saw was on a college campus because it was free and I was having bad dreams. And I say that just to encourage people on campus to utilize the mental health services here. But I went to see a therapist because I was having marital problems and my husband was about to drive me crazy. Mm-hmm. And as I sat there talking to the therapist actually was able to assess that I was having grief issues because my mother died. And so we spent some time dealing with what was going on in my marriage, but the bigger picture was the grief. And, after my mother died for almost 2 years, I would break out in tears unexplainably. I could hear a song and just, lose my mind, be a basket case. A friend of mine would acknowledge, my loss, and I just couldn't stand it. I'd be furious. Mm-hmm. So now I tell people, when you're going through this, see someone, get some grief counseling. It made such a difference in my life. I've adjusted to my loss now. I can talk about my mother now. It is such a relief for me. So I encourage people to do that. And I just want to say one thing about young people, because I've heard that come up a lot in here. I have a 15-year-old who's in one of the most prestigious schools in New York City. And I recently pulled her out of the school in the middle of the school year, which people thought I had lost my mind. Mm-hmm. But we have to be careful about how our kids are being educated. I mean,
yes.
They're in these schools that are so prestigious, and they have these reputations, and they're going to guarantee the college and all that. But as I kept looking at what was going on with my daughter, who was studying all the time, I mean, she was like chained to her desk. She had no outside life. She couldn't participate on the teams because she had so much schoolwork to do. She was a very hard worker, very devoted. And I went to see some of her teachers, and one of them said, well, your daughter's having problems. She's struggling. And I'm like, but I don't understand. I'm looking at A's and B's on her papers over here. There was a whole perception of failure for my child, not just my child, because I mean, I'm seeing it. I mean, it's racism. Let's just talk racism for a minute. And then lack of motivation. You know, the teachers were saying, no matter what you do, it doesn't matter if you come to class, doesn't matter if you do all your homework, extra credit, this whole test-based assessment. If you don't pass all the tests and get a certain average, you're going to fail. Well, my child lost all her motivation for school.
Wow.
So I took her out of this school. I am extraordinarily happy. She's in a school that some people would say, well, you know, it's not the prestige, it's not the status. But I'm so happy that her world is expanding.
That's great.
She's, you know, much more global. She's learning more. She's seeing more. She's not bored. She's engaged. So I think it's just something we really have to look at.
That's an incredible point. Thank you for that. And for having the courage to step outside your comfort zone. I know that was a big step, and I thank you for that. Actually, I was going to ask, Rhonda, well, I'll come back to you. Go ahead. I'll talk to you later. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Derek, and I'm a student in RA at the Harvard School of Public Health. And my question is very similar to the one that was before me. We study like incidence rates, we study psychopathology, we study neurotransmitters, et cetera. And on a personal note, being here at Harvard, my parents come to me and ask questions about their health, cardiovascular, et cetera. And I'm Native American and African American. So within my family alone, like I've seen depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, problems from infidelity, grief. And so my question is related to the one that was before me, but different. How do you connect with people who are close to you individually, not a meta-analysis, but your father, who my father has bipolar disorder, and he'll believe me if I say take this medication for your heart or take this medication for your leg. But to this day, I can't get my family to say, you know, talk to someone or take this medication if the doctor says it. And so I kind of revert back to being an angry black man, and I'm doing all this schoolwork, I'm excelling, I've fought my whole life to help the broader community, but I cry at night because I can't help the people I love. So my question is not how do you help the community, how do you help your father?
What an incredible question. Altha, are you feeling? I know, I know. Well, go ahead.
Apparently am I speechless, but I have to tell you, you just cut to the core of the matter from the professional side. You know, we set out to do all of these things that you're expected to do, to become educated, to become knowledgeable, to share that information, to bring back the message, to help the people. And the people you most want to help, the ones closest to you, either you can't help because it's an impossible task, just from a medical standpoint, or you can't get through to. And what I want to say is don't stop trying, and work everything in your armamentarium to get them to listen to you. But my heart tells me that that's also not likely to be a successful outcome, because having had those same dialogues within my family, I know that they will listen. They will call me 1,000 miles away to ask me about my nephew's perhaps broken ankle, and I'm 1,000 miles away in another state, not an orthopedist, a psychiatrist. And they will call me and ask my opinion about that. But I can't make headway when I see the depression, when I recognize the other problems, and I try to talk about it. I don't have a good answer except don't stop trying.
That and
I think you not only keep trying, but if you think of innovative or other ways of doing things, not trying in the same way, like using some kind of other approach. I mean, I have relatives who are depressed, who are afraid of medications and so on and so forth, who like to think about everything in terms of somatic terms, like they got a bellyache or the tightness in the stomach and so on and so forth, and they're talking about anxiety and sometimes depression. And I can steer them like I'm treating their tightness in the stomach, not the head, which they want to reject, you see, as being stigmatizing, that you think they're not. So you go kind of around the corner a little bit, not kind of straight on in where you're going to clash with what their belief systems are. Or you motivate them in some other kind of way. Say if there's something you know that they want, that they speak that they want, or they want to be able to do, right, that they're not doing, you can say, I think if you take this pill, you don't even have to say bipolar, if you take this medicine, it probably will steady you down enough to probably be able to do that. And those types of variations on the theme. You want to comment?
Okay.
Not to take up any more time, but maybe another thing is that historically, African Americans have looked at mental health in a very negative light, because when my father's older, he's like 65 or so. So when he was growing up, mental health, he thought of it as in shock therapy, or people went away if you said you had a mental disorder and never came back. He was in the Navy.
That's been our experience. That's one of the issues.
So, I was just getting ready to go. I was just getting ready to go there, Alpha.
Once I crossed 50, that didn't seem that old.
The other thing, too, I would just encourage you to, I don't know if you have your own outlet to speak to someone. I think that if one can afford it, therapy is a gift that you give yourself. Because so many times we are moving at lightning speed that we don't even have time to think about or process something somebody said to us or did to us. But when you in there paying for that 45 minutes or hour, whatever it is, or you are able to have that kind of access and you got that time, things will come up that you didn't even know were remotely on the surface. So I would encourage you, because you can only do but so much. You do the best you can, and then you have to let people be. The other thing is, if you come across an article about someone who's had such an experience or something, to share that with them. Those kinds of things that I would recommend to you. Okay? We have to move quickly because we've got to begin to wrap up.
Hi, my name is Tasha Smith.
Tasha, can you speak up a little?
Oh, okay. My name is Tasha Smith, and I'm a Boston native. And for the past 9 years, I've served as a health educator from HIV/AIDS to asthma and diabetes. That was the last position I held at a health center. Mm-hmm. And over the years, I've understood a lot of topics centered around mental illness. My father actually, he suffers from schizophrenia. Mm. So I was able to understand what was going on as I grew up. But as a young child, he had suffered a breakdown. And I didn't really understand what was going on until I got older, and I started to correspond with him more when I was in college.
And you started to what?
Correspond with him more in college. Mm-hmm. It was more like a long-distance relationship. Still to this day, we talk on the phone all the time because he lives in the North Shore area. Mm-hmm. But my struggles have been coping mechanisms with a mentally ill parent, because some days, he's fine, and other days, the green monster can sometimes appear. And it's basically, it goes back to the childhood. My father's father and his siblings had a very, very abusive childhood. And my father suffered from schizophrenia, and two of my aunts became mentally ill also, out of maybe 6 children. Wow. And my father had a breakdown in his 30s. He heard voices, and all I can remember is visiting him in a hospital, and he was literally choking himself to death. So his eyes were bloodshot red, and that was like my fondest memory. He took off his sunglasses, and his eyes were as red as her blazer right there. And one of my aunt's friends' husbands actually witnessed him running through the backyards, having the breakdown. My mom at the